Should I go ahead and start? Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you so much for being here. We are really excited and grateful today. We have two federal judges who are here to share with us about the Declaration of Independence and the birth of our court system. So a big thank you to them for being here today. Before we jump in, I would just like to thank everyone who is an OLLI member for being here. How many of you are already OLLI members? All right. And how many of you are guests here today who are not yet members? All right. So for those of you who are not members, welcome. I'm so thrilled you could join us. And if you have any questions about OLLI, then I encourage you after the conversation with our judges to come chat with members and staff and pick up some OLLI materials on your way out. They were also gracious enough to bring some really cool materials. We have pins, tote bags, and stickers, as well as pocket constitutions provided by our friends from the courthouse. So please check out that merch table as well. And playing cards, yes. And and there will be ice cream after the presentation. So it's a party.
And really quickly, for those of you joining us online as well, we'll have Q&A after the presentation. So if you want to add any questions to the chat as we're going through the presentation today, we can help moderate those after their main presentation.
And as a reminder, for those who are not familiar with OLLI and how we like to use our microphones during the Q&A, we will ask during the Q&A that you either use a microphone, or for our presenters, if the person asking the question doesn't have a microphone, please repeat the question into the microphone before answering it. All right. Thank you so much, everyone, for being here, and we'll hand it over to our guests today.
Thank you, Betsy. I appreciate that. My name is Jim Marner. I tried to work the crowd before we got started. I'm a magistrate judge, and we also have my good friend Mike Ambry, who's also a magistrate judge. Savannah, we hope we'll get here. She had something come up, and if not, we'll somehow work it out. I wasn't going to do this, but circumstances being what they are, if you have a cell phone, can you silence it? And the only reason why I thought about this is my sister Patty is sitting right over there. And I was on the bench, I don't know, about 6 months ago in this big crowded courtroom, probably 3 times as many people as in here. And because I'm so young, I have hearing aids. And my phone was up on the 3rd floor in my office, and I was on the 2nd floor, but somehow it had enough power and it was hooked up to my hearing aids. So all of a sudden I get hit this real, ringing over and over and over and over in my head. And these people out in the crowd are thinking I'm having a stroke or something like that. And so I go back to look, who the hell called me at 10:30 in the morning? And it was my sister Patty. So yeah, okay. Anyway, the plan is we're going to do this in 3 parts. I'm going to talk basically about the Declaration of Independence, kind of the history behind it. Savannah, hopefully, if she gets here, I thought, as I was going through this, you have all these white guys, and I figured, something tells me the women were involved too. So she's going to talk to you about that, and then Mike is going to talk to you about how the Declaration of Independence, it really became the springboard for our court system and the history and the development of that. So that's the plan, and we'll see how well we stick to the plan. But just an opening, first off, thanks for being here. It really is a tremendous milestone. We're celebrating the 250th anniversary of the Declaration of Independence, the birth of our nation. I went to an event in February at the state courthouse, and it was called Law Day. And Justice Ann Timmer, she's now the Chief Justice of the Arizona Supreme Court, she presented. And I thought she did an opening. And I thought it was so good that I reached out to her and I asked her if I could basically plagiarize. And if any of you ever met Justice Timmer, she's just a fantastic person. She was on the road when I reached out to her. I had the entire script emailed to me like within 10 minutes. Really just a fantastic, fantastic lady. So I tweaked it a little bit with my own thoughts, but you know, what she said, it really affected me. And I just wanted to be able to share it with you. So here we go. You know, for many people, and I was picking this up even when I was talking to y'all, this may not seem like a good time to celebrate. No, I mean, seriously, trust in our government institutions is strained. Skepticism about our national direction is widespread, and the mood of the country is incredibly tense. I mean, I think we can all agree on that. But it's important to remember this type of tension is nothing new. I was 13 years old when we celebrated the bicentennial. And while it's tempting to look back 50 years and think of them as the good old days, that's not the case if you really are honest about it. Many Americans at that time had lost their faith in their government. The bicentennial followed Watergate, and the first and only time a United States president was forced to resign from office. And the successor president, Gerald Ford, when he was the minority speaker of the House, he had pushed for the impeachment of a Supreme Court Justice, Douglas, because he didn't agree with his politics. Any of this sounding kind of familiar? Yeah. The scars of the Vietnam War were raw and painful. You all remember that. Remember watching those black and white videos, the fall of Da Nang, things like that? Yeah. There were race riots all over the country. The U.S. ambassador to Beirut had been killed. A car bomb killed Arizona Republic reporter Don Bowles right up in Phoenix that year. Remember that, everybody? Yeah. Patty Hearst was convicted of armed robbery. And David Berkowitz, also known as Son of Sam, was just about ready to start his terror campaign on New York City. And on top of all that, we had the big, bad Soviet Union with enough nuclear missiles pointed at us to destroy us 1,000 times over. I remember, and perhaps some of you do too if you lived here, every Saturday afternoon at 1 o'clock, there was an air raid siren on Broadway at Rosemont, and it would go off. And I'd ask my dad, why was it going off? And you'd have to know my dad, but my dad told me exactly why it was going. And you know, we were reminded, oh, we have Davis Monthan, and we're number 3 on the Russians' hit list. These were heavy times. But, you know, did we stick our tail between our legs? Did we cower? No, we celebrated the bicentennial of this country. I remember all over town, fire hydrants were painted red, white, and blue. Remember that? And tree trunks down like in Sam Hughes, they're all red, white, and blue. I mean, they were probably painting saguaro cactuses back then, red, white, and blue, if you think about it. And we minted a special quarter. Remember the bicentennial quarters? Minted bicentennial quarters, and we came out with a new $2 bill that prominently featured Thomas Jefferson, the author of the Declaration of Independence. So why were we doing this? Why were we holding these parades and these fireworks celebrations? Was it because we felt, no, wait, we have the best government in the world. Everything is peachy. No. We weren't celebrating our government or our leaders. We were celebrating our founding principles, those embodied in the Declaration of Independence. We were recommitting to them, worshiping them, preserving them. That's why we were celebrating. And that's why I think it's incredibly important that we do that again today. Have the courage that our parents had and that we had back then and pass on to our kids and celebrate this incredible document that continues to inspire not only people in this country, but around the world. All right. So as I indicated, I am going to start with kind of a historical approach to the Declaration of Independence. And then hopefully Savannah will get here. Go from there. We'll see how that works out. If you would, there we go. I don't know about you all, but I didn't really pay attention in history when I was a junior in 1979 and 1980 in Rincon High School. And so this has really been kind of a refreshing walk through history that I've had in preparing for these presentations. We've done, I think this is our third now. And it's interesting to note that at the time, around the time of the Declaration of Independence, a lot of people still didn't want to break away from England. It wasn't even a really clear majority. There were benefits to remaining subjects to the crown. There was protections. There were trade favorites, things like that. But you know, as any monarch, I think throughout history does, the king shot himself in the foot to the detriment of the colonists. It was interesting I read a quote from Thomas Jefferson that kind of reflected this reluctance to go forward with independence. This was from 1975, where Thomas Jefferson said he would rather be independence of Great Britain, properly limited, than any other nation upon earth, or than no nation. I mean, this is the guy who a year later wrote the Declaration of Independence. So things dramatically changed. Go to slide 3, please. And it boiled down to, as it often does, disrespect and money. The British were involved in the 7 Years' War, and it was expensive, and they had to finance it. And they financed a lot of it by taxation of the colonies and our predecessors. And, you know, you hear about taxation without representation. Essentially, this was the spur. I have some information up here, and you all can read it, but it kind of came in fits and starts. There was the Stamp Act, and again, it was just a fancy name. I mean, let's face it, the legislation that comes out of Washington, they give it all sorts of names, but often what it boils down to is it's more taxes. And the Stamp Act was particularly onerous to the colonists, and I think King George saw the writing on the wall, and he actually caved in and gave the colonists a little bit of a victory. Hopefully placate them. You know what I mean? Lay off on this tax a little bit, and maybe they'll continue to toe the line. But it just didn't happen, and the colonists got more and more upset about their situation, about how they were being treated, that finally in 1775 the shots heard around the world, and we're off to the races with the Revolutionary War, and the fervor to be independent of Great Britain really hit a tidal wave. Go to 5, please. And around that time, there was a lot of press, just like we have a lot of press. And one of them was Thomas Paine. He wrote Common Sense. I will tell you, I'm going to be totally straight with you, I never read Common Sense until I was getting ready for this. All right. I mean, I don't even think I read the Cliff Notes of Common Sense when I was in high school. And, it's got a lot of doth and say ye's in it and things like that. But give yourself 45 minutes and get a highlighter and gut it out. It's really fascinating. And, I've kind of hinted on how history has repeated itself. And you read this thing and read it thoughtfully, and you'll see it's doing it again. People think there's just no civility anymore in politics. All this name calling, just this vitriol. Read Common Sense. King George, he referred to the king twice as a worm. He referred to the British as murderers and thieves, and he referred to people who would oppose independence and essentially make up with the British as cowards, scoundrels, and monsters. Right? He even gets into it with the Pope. I mean, you can't make this up. He really does. He gets into it with the Pope and the papacy. I had to look. I think I knew that's what it meant, but I had to look it up. It's like, man, he's getting into it with the Pope. Again, history repeating itself. It's a hell of a read, and I strongly urge you all to read it. It'll take some time, but it's just amazing to see how history does repeat itself. And also, I think, one thing about common sense, it really did give Jefferson some great language. I mean, it's almost identical. Let's see if I can find it. To conclude, however strange it may appear to some, or however unwilling they may be to think so, matters not. But many strong and striking reasons may be given to show that nothing can settle our affairs so expeditiously as an open and determined Declaration of Independence. And so Thomas Jefferson, being a well-read man, was off to the races. Jefferson did credit Paine significantly in his writings and throughout history. All right. Now, another thing that I found fascinating was how quickly all this occurred. Think about legislation today. It's 2,512 pages, and it takes a year and a half to get through one side of the House. They started on June 7th, 1776, and less than a month later, they had the Declaration of Independence, and they're all signing it. Less than a month for not only to create this document, but I think even more importantly, to get enough buy-in from the necessary people from all the colonies. They did that in less than a month. I don't think our Congress has balanced a budget. I don't even know. I stopped even looking. I stopped even counting. I don't know. I don't know when they have. And I probably should have said this early on. If you're getting any sort of vibe or any thought or opinion I might have, it's my own. All right. I do not represent the federal court or anybody in it. As I have these discussions with you, if you're detecting any sentiment, it's mine and mine only. Don't get me in trouble and write a letter on that. Anyway, but even after, it seemed like, okay, we got to do this, there was still a lot of resistance. Let's see, what are we on? Be right with you. The Congress, despite resistance, decided, you know what? Let's put together a committee of 5 people, and we'll give them the job of drafting this declaration. And, were there various people thinking, let it go to the committee and die? I don't know. But maybe there was that thought. If that was a thought, boy, they assigned the wrong people to that committee. It was John Adams, Ben Franklin, Thomas Jefferson, Robert Livingston, and Roger Sherman. And somebody had to take the lead and write it. John Adams, by all accounts, and consistent with the HBO series, was a pushy little guy. The history is that he and Jefferson quickly became the 2 most prominent, most outspoken people in this group of 5. And Adams kept saying, you have to write it. And Jefferson said, no, you're the big mouth, you write it. Adams was just on and on and on. Come on, you got to write it. And finally, and probably it was difficult for Adams to do if anything about stories about his ego are true, he had to admit, 1, that he was obnoxious, 2, that people really didn't like him, and 3, that Jefferson was a much better writer. So that sold Jefferson. So, the ultimate goal was to express a unity of purpose with all the colonies to disengage from Great Britain, from the crown. You hear, as I've been going through this and I've been watching various YouTube videos and things like that to educate myself, I've heard repeatedly, again and again, that the Declaration of Independence was a breakup letter with Great Britain, with the crown. I even had one that they were playing that Taylor Swift song, "We Were Never Getting Back Together Ever, Ever, Ever." I mean, I listened to the whole thing because, but I mean, that really seemed to be the point. It was a breakup letter. And Jefferson, he submitted the rough draft on June 28, and it was eventually accepted, but without a lot of editing, and a lot of stuff ended up on the cutting room floor. One of them had to do with slavery. And I thought this would be very interesting. And it's a little bit long, but just let me read it. And then maybe if anybody had any questions, we can talk about it too. And I'm going to qualify this with, based on all the research I did, Jefferson, like many of the signers of the Declaration of Independence, was a slave owner. And he had slaves, and if the information I received in my research is accurate, he actually had 5 children with one of his slaves. Nonetheless, something that wound up on the cutting room floor reads as follows: "He has waged cruel war against human nature itself, violating its most sacred rights of life and liberty in the persons of a distant people who never offended him, captivating and carrying them into slavery in another hemisphere, or to incur miserable death in their transportation thither." He referred to slavery as, quote, "piratical warfare, execrable commerce, and an assemblage of horrors." And at that time, I didn't know this until I was researching for this presentation. I did not know this, that the British had made it known to slaves in the colonies that if they rebelled against their owners and if they killed them, they could seek shelter and solace with the British. So, because when I was reading this one part, I didn't understand it, and I really had to research it. He criticized, Jefferson criticized the crown for exciting those very people, that's the slaves, to rise in arms among us, and to purchase that liberty of which he has deprived them by murdering the people on whom he also obtruded, thus paying off former crimes committed against the liberties of one people with the crimes he urges them to commit against the lives of another. But that ended up on the cutting room floor. And there were, the various theories, and, it was the South that was because of the Carolinas and Georgia. But you look into it a little further, and there was plenty of blame to go around. At the time, they called it, I can't remember, it was something triangle, and it had to do with commerce. And it was terrible. The slaves would come over from Africa to the New World. They'd be dropped off. The New World would fill the ships with cotton and crops and things like that, and it would be sent over to England, where they were now in the industrial era, and they would make linens and cloth and things like that, and then the ships would go back down to Africa and get more slaves. So everybody was profiting. That's what it boiled down to. It was funny, when I was getting ready to do this, I thought to myself, what if the Jefferson and Adams and the northern states, essentially, what if they had insisted, no, this has got to be in there? Well, I think the reality is, if they would have insisted, we would not have had the Declaration of Independence. We would not have had buy-in. So, it's a good what if, but I think, what if we just would have remained a colony of the crown until they got more fed up later on. And the reality was that slavery was it so permeated the world. It had been in existence for not like 9,000 years, that it wasn't something that was going to go away just because 5 guys in Philadelphia wrote something on a piece of parchment. But anyway, it's interesting to reflect on this. We are by no means perfect creatures. and we all have our warts as countries and as individuals. And I think that's one thing about the language of the Declaration of Independence. It's aspirational. I think Michael touched on this a little bit when he's talking about you, but the Declaration of Independence does not create any laws. We judges don't ever cite it for anything. Yeah, it's the Constitution that's the mechanism. I think that, but it's the Declaration that's the aspiration. All right, so, yeah. Could you go on the next one, please? So the signers, we have, let me talk about Thomas Jefferson. Thomas Jefferson, very interesting guy, fluent in like 5 different languages. He was, by all accounts, not a very sociable guy, not much of a public speaker, but very, very bright, very learned, and actually had spent a large part of his early years and, as a young man reading. That seemed to be his job. I'm not sure how he made a living doing that, but somehow he did. And obviously the wisdom that he managed to glean from all that reading, from all that study, was really manifested in the document itself. John Hancock, perhaps the most famous signature in history. I read a lot about this guy. I think I really would have liked this guy. First off, if you look at all the paintings and pictures, he's a good-looking dude. No, I mean, seriously, I like pulled up a bunch of different pictures of him. He's like a good-looking guy. All the other guys are kind of, their eyes are closed, they're fat, something like that. Hancock was a pretty good-looking guy. And the information I have suggests that he knew it. And he had a big ego. And, the whole thing about the John Hancock signature is he's first signed, and he is said to have signed it so big, and after he signed it, he said, this way John Bull, which was the king, won't have to put on his spectacles to see my signature. The only problem with that is the king never saw that copy. They did all sorts of other copies. They spread them out all over the world, all over the place. And a lot of these copies, I mean, it wasn't like today. A lot of them weren't the signed copy. So the king never actually got to see that copy, but it makes for a hell of a story. Let's see. John Adams, like I said before, I think, he was a real pugnacious guy. And he came from Massachusetts. So he was a northerner, and his relationship with Jefferson was funny. When they were drafting the Declaration of Independence, they were best of friends, and then later on they ran against each other and they didn't speak to each other for years and years and years. And only as they both got a little older and got out of politics did they start writing to each other. And an interesting note. John Adams and Thomas Jefferson died on the same day within 5 hours of each other. They died on the 50th anniversary of the signing of the Declaration of Independence. I mean, if that's not the universe telling us something, I don't know what is. That still kind of gives me chills. It gave me chills just now thinking about that. That's amazing. But Adams was he was a driving force. He remained in politics for a long time. He was the first president to live in the White House. He did. I mean, we could devote an entire presentation just to him, but I got to move on. If Savannah gets here, you'll hear about his wife. If not, either Mike or I will talk to you about him. Let's see who else. Benjamin Franklin. All right, this guy amazes me. While I really think I would have hung out with Hancock, I would have liked to follow. I think I just would. This guy would have been the guy I'd follow around anywhere. Go on a detour with me with this. He was involved with the Declaration of Independence, and it starts off, we hold these truths to be self-evident. He wrote in self-evident. Before it was sacred and something like that. It was more religious. But Franklin he was a scientist. So he crossed that out and he wrote self-evident. when I was getting ready for this presentation, and I promised I researched the other ones before I did it, but this one I just really got into it. It was amazing what a Renaissance man this guy was. He ran away from Boston when he was like 18 or 19, something like that, from his family, made his way to Philadelphia, didn't have, was destitute. Within a couple of years, he started up a printing company, and by the time he's in his early 40s, he can retire because he's financially set. But he didn't. He just kept going. And what I did is, and you all can do the same thing too, I Googled inventions of Benjamin Franklin. And the ones that I at least made note of was lightning rod, all right? Because, he flew the kite in the thunderstorm, and he determined that the presence of electricity. He actually came up with first talking about positive and negative charges. That came from him. So a lightning rod, bifocal glasses, the Franklin stove. Back before the Franklin stove, you'd have a hearth, so just like a regular fireplace, and it wasn't very effective in heating. And that's, they really needed it for heating because it would just kind of heat the area around here, and most of the heat would go up. And he invented this stove. You pull it out a little bit, and it has vents, and it sucks air in. And it's really kind of a fascinating thing that he made. And it was very practical. Swim paddles. Yeah, like fins. He got, flat boards, and because he was a swimmer, apparently. Didn't seem to have the physique for that, but he was a swimmer, apparently. And he came up with that. This one I found fascinating. The flexible urinary catheter. Before that, they would just use a steel tube. And his brother, I think his brother's name was John, his older brother, he had kidney stones. And he came up with the flexible urinary catheter. He jokingly suggested that daylight savings time would be a good way to proceed, because when he was the ambassador to France, he'd go and the French would stay up till 2, 3, 4 o'clock in the morning, and they go through candles like nobody's business. And Franklin was always a very economical guy. He said, "Look, we can save candles. Let's just move the clock back," almost as a joke. And guess what? It took on. The odometer. Franklin essentially was the father of the Postal Service. And he had to figure out, they were trying to figure out a way how to make the charges commensurate with what the service was. So he devised this thing that he attached to a carriage, and it had gears on it, and it would click, and it would count, and he'd be able to calculate how far it was from, one farm to the next. The glass harmonica. This was something, you got to YouTube this thing, all right? This is crazy. Apparently Franklin, when he was he went to France, and there was a performer who had all these wine glasses filled with different levels. And we've all done that, right? And you see the thing and they play, Ode to Joy and all that. Well, Franklin figured there was a better way to do that. And what he did is he got a bunch of bowls of different sizes, all right? And he put them on an axle. So you got the little bowl here and the big bowl there. And then you had a crank, so he'd crank it, and the bowls would spin, and you'd wet your fingers, and you could play things. Yeah, check it out online. It's really fascinating. His studies really were consistent with charting the Gulf Stream and the Atlantic Ocean, the way that weather follows barometric pressure as opposed to wind. He was a fascinating guy. And it's just something that, I think, call it what you want. Call it luck, call it divine intervention. But I think, he really was a gift that we as Americans got at a time when we needed somebody like him. And I think we're all the better for it. All right. Let's see. So the next one. All right, so they finally got their act together. John Adams went to his grave saying we should celebrate on July 2nd as opposed to July 4th. He lost that one, but they finally got their act together. The Declaration was widely distributed, read in public, copied and printed in newspapers, And the parchment copy, which is now in the National Archives and which bears the signatures of all the signers, it was ultimately signed. They began the actual signing of that on August 2. And it took several weeks because they had to travel around with the thing before it got signed. So that brings us up to now we have a Declaration of Independence. And where do we go from there? But before we go on from there, Savannah's here. And she's going to talk to you about some of the women behind it. Because, yeah.
Going back to your slide on the 5 individuals that on the committee to draft the Declaration of Independence. The initial impression of all of them was the obvious choice to draft it would be Benjamin Franklin. Franklin refused, and the reason he gave is, I never write a document that will be reviewed by a committee. As the document then was drafted and came back to the committee and then Congress, they began to edit it and change a lot of it. And Jefferson was sitting at the table and just seething with anger as they changed it. Franklin leaned over to him and essentially said, see what I mean?
We have this guy removed. All right, for those of you out in YouTube land, Mr. Nordahl here apparently, no, I'm teasing. Thank you, sir. Hey, all I know is what I read on the internet. There's a different historical reference that actually Benjamin Franklin was going to be the choice person to write it, but he didn't want to have his work edited or criticized or reviewed. And when they were editing and reviewing and criticizing Thomas Jefferson's work subsequently, Benjamin Franklin leaned over and said, you know, see what I mean? Kind of said, I told you so. Okay, did I get anything else wrong? All right. I'm teasing. Yeah, and you know, did I get that? Listen, if you're all going to go home and research everything and email it to me, that's fine. It's the last time I talked to Al. No, I'm teasing. No, thank you. So this is the way it's supposed to be. It's supposed to be interaction. That's great. Now, before I get embarrassed any further, I'm going to turn the floor over to Savannah. You behave yourself with her, okay? And she's going to talk a little bit about some of the women who were active and who we all think deserve some recognition.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Savannah Riza. I am a magistrate courtroom clerk at the District of Arizona. I work with these lovely judges along with a couple other ones. Well, to go ahead and get started, the women and the Declaration of Independence, remembering the ladies. Abigail Adams wrote a letter to her husband, John Adams, while he was in Philadelphia during the drafting of the Declaration of Independence, urging him to remember the ladies. Adams' Remember the Ladies letter was a plea for women's rights wherein Adams famously urged, in the new code of laws, which I suppose it will be necessary for you to make, I desire you would remember the ladies and be more generous and favorable to them with your ancestors. Although Adams' plea in her Remember the Ladies letter was ignored, the letter is recognized as foreshadowing the women's formal rights movement in the following century. Printed by Mary Catherine Goddard. Mary Catherine Goddard was an early American publisher and the postmaster of the Baltimore Post Office from 1775 to 1779. She is responsible for printing the first copy of the Declaration that included the names of the signers. With this printing, she risked her life and livelihood by including on the Declaration, Baltimore in Maryland, printed by Mary Catherine Goddard. New and more respectable footing. Mercy Otis Warren, born in 1728 to prominent parents, became a politically astute, prolific writer who worked as a poet, political playwright, and polemisher, and became the leading female philosopher of the Revolution. Warren frequently corresponded with John Adams. Chapter 9 of the 3-volume History of the Rise, Progress, and Termination of the American Revolution, 1805, recounts the story of the Declaration of Independence and famously states, "By the Declaration of Independence, drafted by the foes and for a time doubtfully viewed by many of the friends of America, everything stood on a new and more respectable footing, both with regard to the operations of war or negotiations with foreign powers. Americans could now no more be considered as rivals in their proposals for treaties of peace and conciliation with Britain. They were a distant people who claimed the rights, the usage, the faith, and the respect of nations uncontrolled by any foreign power. The colonies thus irrefutably lost to Great Britain, and a new face appeared on all affairs, both at home and abroad."
I wonder if that's in Elizabeth Warren's lineage from Massachusetts.
Make something up.
Yes.
On that note, we're going to introduce you to Michael Ambry, Judge Ambry. He's going to answer that question for you.
I'll say yes. Ben Franklin was revered in his day. Holds a special place in history. I have often wondered, would Ben Franklin have been Ben Franklin if his parents had given him an iPhone? As I did to my kids, we'll see. I think he probably would have been more interested in taking it apart than, but so I'm going to talk about the creation of the federal court system. Underlying the creation of the federal court system are 3 important principles. 1, judicial independence, the ability of judges to make decisions without fear of influence from political forces, influence from special interests, influence from the monarch. Because we all have the right and the need to have our disputes, our personal disputes, disputes of societal significance decided in front of a person who is impartial, who is not susceptible to influence from the other branches of government, who is not susceptible to reprisal even by the will of the majority. Judicial independence is number 1. Number 2, separation of powers. We'll talk about the Constitution, and I think you all know that the judicial branch is its own branch of government, provided for that way in the Constitution. So underlying the creation of the federal court system is separation of powers. What is the court's role? What is the executive's role? And what is the legislative role? Last principle that I want to mention underlying the creation of the federal court system is the rule of law. We are a nation of laws, and if we want to succeed, we have to be a nation of laws. There is nobody above the law. That is a guiding principle from the earliest days of our country. It's a guiding principle for our federal judiciary, and it needs to be. It wasn't always that way, but by the time of the Declaration of Independence, this was a well-established principle. The Declaration of Independence is roughly 1,320 words in the body. And by the way, who knows the official title of the Declaration of Independence. I didn't know it. I learned it this morning. Who knows the Declaration? Who knows the official title? It's fascinating. The first words on the Declaration of Independence are in Congress, July 4, 1776, the unanimous declaration of the 13 United States of America. We call it the Declaration of Independence. With united lowercase. I find that really interesting. We are now uppercase United States of America. At that time, they were not the uppercase United States of America. They were just united. But the Declaration of Independence has 27 grievances listed in it, in the body of those 1,320 words. Grievances against the crown, things like imposing taxes without their consent, depriving them of trial by jury, suspending colonial legislatures. But among those indictments against the crown was the suppression of judicial independence. By that time, it was a very well-established principle. Here's what it said. The Declaration calls out the king for having, quote, made judges dependent on his will alone for the tenure of their offices and the amount in payment of their salaries. Judicial independence was won by the Britons nearly 100 years before the Declaration of Independence, during the as a result of what was called the Glorious War, which resulted in a constitutional monarchy in England, but also resulted in guaranteed independence for the judiciary. In 1701, what was called the Settlement Act, in response to previous monarchs' domination of the judiciary, set out certain guarantees for judicial independence. Those were security of tenure. Judges couldn't be removed from office arbitrarily if they ruled against the monarch. A removal mechanism. It required both houses of parliament to remove a judge from office. It sounds familiar. This is 74 years before the Declaration of Independence, and fixed salaries. Judges could make their decisions without fear of having their salaries reduced. Those protections, though, in that Settlement Act of 1701, they didn't apply to the American colonies. So despite this well-established and necessary condition for a civilized nation, it didn't apply to the United States, to the American colonies. So hence, one of those 27 grievances is quit interfering with our judiciary. A real bone of contention and one of the main sources of grief that the colonists had. So after the Revolutionary War, one of the first tasks of the new Congress, given the importance of the judiciary, was to set up the federal court system. And that was the Federal Judiciary Act. Thank you. The Federal Judiciary Act, which was signed into law by President Washington in 1789. Now, the founders, the constitutional drafters, knew that creating a judiciary was one of their most important jobs. But Article 3 of the Constitution is pretty bare bones. There's not much to it. It's the smallest of the three articles. Article 1 establishes the legislative branch. Article 2 establishes the executive branch. Article 3, which we'll take a look at in just a moment, is really just a rough outline of what the judiciary is. A really vague outline. So the questions left by Article 3 after the Constitution was enacted had to be answered. And the answer came from the political system, the political process, and were embodied in the Federal Judiciary Act of 1791. Now, this act really was the start of the federal judiciary. Number one, it established the Supreme Court. Article 3 specifically provided for a Supreme Court. It didn't provide for any lower courts other than, as you'll see, that Congress can, if it wishes, do that. The only court that's required in the Constitution is the Supreme Court. So the Judiciary Act does that. It sets up the Supreme Court with 6 justices. It sets up 3 circuit courts, and these are not the circuit courts that we have today. These are trial courts with in various spots in the new states, and also district courts, which we do have now, which are also trial courts. Those were set up in major cities, all with limited jurisdiction. These courts are not unlimited. They can't decide every case that comes before them. They don't have authority to decide every kind of case that comes before them. Congress decided we are going to set these courts up with limited jurisdiction, limited authority to decide well-defined types of cases with well-defined types of parties. Jurisdiction is in the legal world paramount. We are all, as judges, very aware and conscious of making sure that we have the authority granted by the Constitution and by Congress to decide the case that's in front of us. And so anyone who is involved in litigating cases knows that it has to be filed in the right court. It has to be the type of case that's properly before that court. And we as judges pay really close attention to that because we don't want to go outside of our lane, separation of powers. All with limited jurisdiction. It gave the Supreme Court the jurisdiction that was provided for in the Constitution. It also gave the Supreme Court, which was called original jurisdiction, meaning the Supreme Court could actually serve as a trial court for these particular types of cases. It also expanded that by giving the Supreme Court appellate jurisdiction in certain cases. Then, and with respect to the other courts, they had certain jurisdiction with respect to cases at the trial level. So why limited jurisdiction? Why would the Congress set up courts that were limited? The answer is that seems to be that people at the time were very suspicious of a centralized government. They did not trust a government that was far away, that was run by people who they didn't know. They just fought a war to get away from being ruled from afar. And so the Congress at the time, recognizing this, was very sensitive to that issue and left a lot of room for state and local courts, which we also have today. 1891, quite a bit later, Congress creates a separate tier of intermediate appellate courts. These are the circuit courts of appeal that we know today. But otherwise left the judicial structure intact, and it's largely the same now as it was after the Judiciary Act of 1891, with some minor adjustments. So let's just look at Article 3. I think we need to go back one slide. I haven't been given the signal. You're doing the slides. You're doing the slides. Okay. I was so appreciative of you. It's over here. All right. See if we can go back a slide. Yeah. Okay. So we'll just take a little look at Article 3. Article 3 establishes the judicial branch. It also is the source of power or authority for the judicial branch. So it starts with the judicial power of the United States shall be vested in one Supreme Court and such inferior courts as the Congress may from time to time ordain and establish. So the Constitution sets the judiciary apart in its own article from the legislative branch, from the executive branch. It's its own separate branch of government. Each branch has its own article in the Constitution. It provides for a Supreme Court, but it's up to Congress to decide what other federal courts we might have, if any. It doesn't require that we have any other courts. As a matter of fact, the first Judiciary Act set it up so that the 6 Supreme Court justices had to ride circuit. They had to get on their horse and go around to different courts all over the place to hear cases as trial judges. I don't know that anyone would do that now. But today we have that same three-tiered system. I think we can go to the next slide. We have 94 judicial districts spread out across the 50 states. That means that there are 94 district courts, a district court in each of those districts. And when I say district court, there might be more than one court in that, more than one courthouse in that district. In Arizona, our state is a district, and we have three courthouses, three federal courthouses in Arizona. Four federal courthouses in Arizona. So there's 94 judicial districts. That means there are 94 district courts in the United States. Those are the trial courts. We have 13 circuit courts of appeal. 12 of them are by geography, including the District of Columbia. And we have a federal circuit court, which here's specialized subject matter cases like patent cases, international trade. So 13 circuit courts. And then we have, of course, the Supreme Court. There's about 874 what I'll call Article 3 judges, judges who are nominated by the president and confirmed by the Senate. About 874 of those, 9 Supreme Court justices, 179 circuit courts of appeal judges. We're in the Ninth Circuit Court of Appeal. 677 district court judges and 9 Court of International Trade judges. Those are all judges nominated by the president, confirmed by the Senate. So why did the framers guarantee that we would have a Supreme Court, but left open the possibility that we wouldn't have any other federal courts? We talked about this just a moment ago. Fear of a centralized government, suspicion of a centralized government. People recognized that the populace wasn't ready for that, didn't want that because of what had already occurred up to that point. So the solution was that there would be a Supreme Court that would get the last word on matters of federal importance, but the states would have their own courts. There'd be local and state courts. If the states did something that was disruptive to the federal system, that ultimately would be heard by the Supreme Court. And so the Supreme Court would have the last word, protecting the federal system, but also allowing for local and state courts to exist. And the remainder of the judiciary, besides the Supreme Court, would be hashed out in the political process. I think that's brilliant. We're not going to solve this problem from now until forever. There's some room here for elected officials to craft the courts the way they need to be at the time. I think that's just amazingly brilliant. The second sentence of Article 3 also goes to separation of powers, judicial independence, and rule of law. Here it is. The judges, both of the Supreme and inferior courts, shall hold their offices during good behavior and shall at stated times receive for their services a compensation which shall not be diminished during their continuation in office. I doubt it's word for word, but it's what was in that 1701 Settlement Act. We can't have political actors, either the executive or some other powerful person, firing judges because they don't like their decision. Judges are supposed to make decisions based on the law, not because they're afraid that they're going to lose their job or have their pay cut. Judges are to make decisions based on the law, regardless whether those decisions are unpopular or disliked by the other branches of government, regardless any other outside influence. That is the guarantee that we all need and that we all have in the judicial system that has been created for us. Here's what Alexander Hamilton said in Federalist number 78. And I think there was a fair amount of debate over what we're going to talk about in a moment, which is lifetime tenure. Well, maybe we'll save that for now. But Alexander Hamilton said judicial independence is the best expedient which can be devised in any government to secure a steady, upright, and impartial administration of the laws. Judicial independence is everything. If we have judges who are susceptible to outside influence, we can't trust that these matters of public importance and private importance are decided according to the law. I can tell you we have that kind of system. We have judicial independence, and it's because of the way it was set up. So what does holding offices during good behavior mean? What does that mean? It doesn't mean, excuse me for a moment. Well, let's look at what it means. It has been interpreted to mean that the only way a duly appointed Article III judge can be removed from office is if the House impeaches that judge. There's charges of impeachment brought before the House of Representatives. The House of Representatives votes on those articles of impeachment and passes them. And then the judge undergoes a trial of sorts in the Senate, and the Senate convicts that judge. Then they may be removed from office. The executive has no power, just as the monarchs, the Stuart monarchs, back in the late half of the 17th century, had no power to remove a judge. Here's a couple of reasons some judges have been removed. There have only been 15 judges ever impeached in the House of Representatives. There's only ever been 8 in the history of the courts that have been convicted and removed from office. Here's one. 1862, I think you'll know almost immediately what this is about. 1862, West H. Humphreys. He was a U.S. District Court judge for the Middle, Eastern, and Western districts of Tennessee, on charges of refusing to hold court and waging war against the government. Waging war against the government. That's what it took to get somebody impeached. What do you think that was about? He's in Tennessee. It's 1860. He was a Confederate judge. I don't think it was any surprise to him that he was removed. He was done being a United States District Court judge anyway. That guy got through the war. He was never again a United States District Court judge, but he survived the insult and went on to have a legal career. But more recently, G. Thomas Porteous, U.S. District Court for the Eastern District of Louisiana, impeached on charges of accepting bribes and making false statements under penalty of perjury. What could be worse for a judge than to accept bribes? It doesn't get much worse than that. I mean, so in practical terms, unless a judge commits a crime or does some act that's equally bad or violates the integrity of the court, they have what has been described as lifetime tenure. I'll say this about the courts. You hear this sometimes, and maybe it's a little simplistic. The legislature has the power of what? They have the power of the purse. The executive has the power of what? The sword. The executive has the power of the sword. The court, what gives the court its authority is the esteem that the population holds it in. Without public trust, without the respect that everyone has for the law, the courts have nothing. So if you want to get rid of the courts, get rid of the esteem the public has for the courts. And I can tell you, aside from some of these bad apples who should have been removed, we as judges hold that responsibility solemnly. So, and aside from lifetime tenure, neither Congress nor the president can cut their salaries. So judges don't have to worry about their livelihood, their families becoming destitute. Unlike in the old day, everybody was a farmer. They were, all these really brilliant guys back at the time of the founding of the country. They were amazing. They were Renaissance people, as Judge Marner said. They farmed. They had trades. They were scholars, 5 languages. John Adams, surly as he was a brilliant, brilliant guy. His cousin Sam Adams, I don't know, made beer. I don't I don't know. No, Sam Adams was also very, very important in the Revolutionary times, and I don't think he was. I don't think he might have made beer on the side. I don't know, uh, but lifetime tenure is not without some criticism. It can result in judges staying too long, beyond their ability to be a competent judge, maybe even just because they're out of touch at a certain point. This was really debated at the time of the Constitution. The Constitution was in the works, and it was well recognized. But the trade-off was the benefit was that we must have lifetime tenure to make sure that our judges are independent and they can act independently. So every once in a while, you might get one who loses his mind, but we'll deal with that when the time comes. Lifetime tenure raises, pardon me?
Whether or not somebody would, I'm sorry, I'm not going to make any comment.
Hold the thought, I guess. Okay, all right. So it does raise another question, lifetime tenure. In the federal government, we have many, many officials who are not Article III judges, but act as judges. They decide all kinds of issues without the protections of Article III. Think about military courts, administrative courts like Social Security judges. They work for federal agencies. They work for the executive branch. And they rule on a wide variety of issues, things like whether a company used deceptive advertising, whether a company violated communication laws, whether someone is entitled to disability benefits, whether a business interfered with people's right to unionize. These are very important issues, and they're decided at administrative levels by administrative judges who are not subject to the Article III protections. There are safeguards in place for the most part for those types of activities, and those are necessary. I don't know how we'd function without administrative judges. But why allow these types of judges to work in the capacity of a judge without those same sorts of protections? Why? Why would we do that? Because their decisions are subject, absolutely, expertise. I mean, I don't know how we would survive without administrative judges who are experts in particular areas. I don't know anything about unions, but there's a whole host of reasons. Also, administrative remedy processes like that are more efficient often. They also alleviate the burden on the courts. A lot of these matters can be resolved with the people who have the expertise. But also, administrative decisions are subject to review by duly appointed, presidentially nominated, and Senate confirmed judges. So the judicial review is there for those. How judges are selected also is very important, and also has underlying it those issues of judicial independence. In many state systems, judges are elected. They're elected directly by the voters, and state and local systems. You probably have seen campaign signs for judges. Why is that? Why would we have judges who have to run for office and be beholden to those who help them become elected? The idea is that if a judge is elected by the community that judge serves, they have more legitimacy. And there's really something to that. In the federal system, and by the way, in Arizona, it's a mix. In certain counties, judges are selected through a merit selection process where there's a committee that vets them and then nominates certain few candidates to the governor, and then the governor vets them and then appoints them. In other counties in Arizona, it is an election in state court. In the federal system, pardon me, yeah.
How do immigration judges fit in?
Yeah, immigration judges are administrative judges. So they are selected through the process that agency prescribes for the selection of judges. So they're not presidentially appointed and they're not Senate confirmed, but they're just one example of many types of judges. But I can tell you, they are vetted heavily, and they're selected for their competence and their character. At least the ones that I know. In the federal system, the process strikes a balance. The Article 3 judges are vetted by the political system, elected officials. The president nominates them after a full vetting process, and then the Senate has to vote on them and confirm them or not confirm them. That has happened. So they are sort of vetted by the elected officials representing the populace, the community, the judges to serve, and then they are approved by the Senate. So someone asked how we're appointed as magistrate judges. If I have a moment, I'll answer that question to everyone. You asked me that question. Yeah, okay. All right, the last two paragraphs of the Declaration of Independence. The last two paragraphs, they're like a punch in. The Declaration for 1,320 words. I have never written 1,320 words. I don't think it's just a document that is so important, so well crafted for its purpose. I haven't read it in a long time, and I did recently, and was just absolutely impressed. But the final two paragraphs consider the damaged relations between the colonists, the now Americans, and the Britons. They explore the implications of independence, and they declare a new chapter in history. The second to last paragraph justifies the breaking of the colonist bonds with their British siblings, their relatives, their blood relatives. It affirms that the colonists had been diligent in, quote, their attentions to our British brethren. North American colonists, for a very long time, considered themselves patriotic British subjects. They had fought wars for the empire. They cherished the British government. They emulated British society. By 1740, colonists celebrated at least 6 major British, I'll call them holidays, but celebrated the monarch and the empire. Some of those celebrations were the King's birthday, Coronation Day, and Guy Fawkes Day. Does anyone know? Does anyone know what Guy Fawkes Day is? I didn't. There it is. Exactly. Were you a history professor? You're a history professor. All right. All right.
Need to give him a microphone.
Yeah, let's get a microphone. Hold on.
We're upset with Parliament because they were feared that Catholicism was going to be approved by Parliament as the state religion. So they went into the basement of Parliament, loaded it up with multiple kegs of gunpowder, and the intent was to wait for the king to show up. They would ignite it, and they would be done with Parliament and the king. Unfortunately, or fortunately, one of their colleagues got cold feet, exposed the plot, and the only ones who really suffered were Guy Fawkes and his colleagues. That's a rough, very rough summary.
Go ahead.
I don't remember. Do you remember the years of Guy Fawkes?
Remember is a strong word. I didn't know it. I recently learned this. 1605.
I think it was during
1605 is what my
maybe Charles the First. James.
King James. Another historian. I knew we were going to get picked apart at this event. Retired professors, retired teacher. Who else do we have? A PhD historian. Okay. It's wonderful to be. We really appreciate you having us here today. It's a wonderful organization, and as part of our 250th anniversary of the Declaration of Independence celebration, it's really nice to be here with you all. I'm almost done. Where was I? Guy Fawkes. Guy Fawkes. So that, I mean, think about that. For many years, the colonists are celebrating the foiling of a plot to kill the king. And as Judge Marner said, it turned at a certain point. Elite families sent their kids to school in Britain. Colonists waited for the news from the mother country. These were British subjects. So the second to last paragraph in the Constitution appeals to their British brethren. It appeals to their sense of political rights and their shared history and roots and their common cultural and economic ties. And it notes the colonists' warning, quote, attempts by the legislature to extend an unwarrantable jurisdiction over us. And yet, their British brethren had ignored them. Quote, the voice of justice and consanguinity had ignored the voice of justice and consanguinity, their shared blood. In other words, the British people weren't helping them either. And the last sentence amounts to no longer are Americans and the Britain's siblings. We're now enemies at war. Maybe someday we'll be friends at peace, but we're moving on. That's right. The King of England is here on a visit. Yeah. Yeah.
You should have invited him.
So the last paragraph, and I'm almost done, and we can end. I know we're supposed to end at 2:30, but I think we're all happy to stay longer if you'd like and talk about any of the issues you'd like to talk about. The last paragraph then turns toward the realities of independence. It reminds readers that, first of all, that the authors of the Declaration are empowered by the people of the colonies. They are acting on their behalf with their consent. This simple statement at the end of the Declaration of Independence sets the United States apart from other nations whose governments were formed by military might or by inheritance, by birth. The United States is as the title says, this is a declaration of the 13 United States of America. It lists powers that are now reserved for this new nation, this new government. The list is far from comprehensive, doesn't even touch on the many things that would become necessary for the federal government to function. And it leaves a lot of questions unanswered that would be answered after the business of fighting was done. Last, the Declaration recognizes that the people are the ultimate arbiter of power. They choose how they want power wielded, but that people are infallible. And so it appeals to a higher power, the Declaration of Independence. It sounds like Ben Franklin made a tweak there that I agree with. Self-evident is so strong. These truths are self-evident, but the Declaration also does appeal to a higher power. I think we're almost through the slides. Maybe the next slide. Yeah, so the Declaration is just an astounding document. Certainly one of the most important documents in American history, possibly in the world, certainly influential throughout the world. It was the inspiration for many changes in our country since the time of its authoring, and it's been an inspiration for people around the world who are striving for better lives, for more equity and more freedom. So I think the principles that are in the Declaration have stood the test of time. We sure thank you for having us on this 250th year anniversary of the Declaration of Independence. We can still take questions if you'd like, and if you want to stick around longer, that's fine. Oh, let me answer the question that was asked to me before. Judge Marner and I are magistrate judges. We are not nominated by the president and confirmed by the Senate. We are chosen through a different process, and our authority is defined by statute, by a statute enacted by Congress. So Congress has established what our jurisdiction is, and we are selected through a merit selection process. There's a committee that is formed whenever there's an opening on the court for a magistrate judge position. And that merit selection committee takes applications, vets the applications and the applicants, interviews people, and eventually nominates a certain number to all of the district judges in that district. The district judges then have their process to vet the applicant, the finalists, the nominees, and then selects the magistrate judge to fill that position. We're appointed for 8-year terms. 8-year terms. And it's possible to be renewed after your initial 8-year term, as long as you're, as long as you are accepted by the district judges to do that. So each of us, we were both practicing lawyers before. Actually, Judge Marner was a state court judge for many years in the Pima County Superior Court, and before that was a practiced law for many years. I was also a practicing lawyer before I was appointed. I was the civil chief at the U.S. Attorney's Office, United States Attorney's Office in Arizona, part of the Department of Justice. And before that, I was a civil litigator. I was a commercial litigator in private practice. Yes, sir.
Yeah, on behalf of the OLLI board, I'd like to officially thank you and all of you for coming down here today. We really appreciate this, and you're welcome to come back at any time to talk more about the federal judiciary. Well, but I also had a question. Just last month, the Chief Justice, John Roberts, said that he was really worried about the dangerous attacks on the federal judiciary. We've heard many of them this year, and that they have to stop. And I wonder, he wasn't talking, disagreements about opinions so much as he was the attacks that, these judges need to be removed and that kind of thing. Lack of respect for the judiciary. I'm wondering what the mood is in the federal court system right now about these growing attacks that we've seen. How you and your colleagues view the current climate.
It's not going to change how judges make their rulings. It exists. Violence exists in the world, and it has been directed toward judges recently and in the past. it's not going to have an effect on judicial independence as long as judges are concerned.
That is one thing that, and this is going to sound like a Clint Eastwood response, but I don't mean for it to be. That is one thing that I learned as I was going and reminded of as I was going through preparing for these presentations. We've done several, is the courage of our forefathers. I mean, they put everything on the line. You know, think and think about Savannah. What was the name of the lady who's said her name was on the Declaration of Independence as a print? I mean, think about that. You know, back then, them's hanging words. You know what I mean? And the reality is, you just got to keep doing your job. You can never cave to the mob. That rhymes. I didn't even mean to that. But you know, you can't cave to the mob. I mean, the only way we continue with this experiment we call democracy is we got to be brave. You know what I mean? Oh, you know, somebody might come after us. Well, that's the world. And if we're going to let threats and, you know, the occasional nut job determine how we do our jobs, all's lost. We have to take, I guess, a page from history. We just got to be brave. And, you know, one thing I think a grassroots approach to it is good too. You know, you'll be out on the golf course, or you might be at a cocktail party, or you might be in line at Costco, and you hear people bad mouthing the judiciary, bad mouthing this about, you know, step up, say something, say, you know, I mean, you got to be careful if he's got a gun or something like that. But you know what I mean? It's like, yeah, Marner told me to go talk to him. So, but you know, we're all in this together. I mean, it's not like we just get to stand by, to stand by and let these bullies and these mobs take over. I mean, we all have to be brave, and there's no good answer. You know, I was a judge in state court for a long time, and I had to rule on a lot of things. I can't tell you how many times I'd be at Safeway or Costco or Home Depot, and somebody would be giving me the stink eye, and I'd be thinking, oh boy, I ruled on that parenting plan, or I sent her cousin to prison on something. And, you know, you can't give way to your fears. So there's no good answer, Bill. I don't know. Anybody else have any questions? Yes, ma'am.
I just for now, I want to say how grateful we are for the stance you are all taking. And please share it with your colleagues, because we are more grateful now than ever.
Great. Thanks.
I'm just very curious what y'all think John Roberts wants his legacy to be.
You got to ask.
No, I think every judge wants to be known as competent, as having followed the law, as having put all of them, so their head, their heart, their gut into the work, and has done the best job they can for the parties, for the litigants, for the communities that are affected by the decisions. I think every judge wants to be known as having been fair and impartial, and having left behind work that was useful and that was right.
Hope you're right.
One quick question. There are 4 U.S. federal marshals here for protection. Is that something you have to have?
Marner doesn't need that.
Give him softball. No, these guys are fantastic. And you know, in putting together these speaking programs, I reached Elliot Manspeaker. He's the he's the honcho down here at our court, and he's always the quiet guy off to the side. And they are the ultimate professionals. And I will tell you, it feels strange because I just feel like I'm just a guy, and why do I have this here? But when we go out, we represent the court, and their job is to protect the court, and we are, as of right now, an extension of the court. So, yeah, they have to deal with us. So, yeah. Yes, Professor.
Question for you. I'm concerned about the aura of politics that seems to be creeping into particularly the Supreme Court area. And I think it's in part related to the way the media operates with regard to the Supreme Court. You read a newspaper and they list a judge's name and then say appointed by, which has no bearing on anything we're talking about. Or they talk about the 4 or 5 conservatives on the court. And I think the answer to this, and what I would recommend for people in the audience, if you like to know what's going on in the Supreme Court, read the opinions. They're published. You can read what the judges say and make your own decisions. And I think it will dispense with any idea that there is abject political maneuvering going on. I quit. I'm done.
We've got a question online. Cheryl Dixon, if you'd like to unmute yourself, you should be able to ask your question.
Hello there. I'm just curious if, we see it all the time that judges are making rulings across the, United States, and then they're not, the people that they make the rulings on aren't following them. I mean, what's the recourse on that? Sorry.
I'm sorry, Cheryl, you were breaking up. We didn't get that. We're gonna.
I mean, it's a tough one, I know, but it just seems like it's happening more and more, and I don't know that it happens around here so much, but you see it in the news all the time, and so just curious,
Well, and Judge Ambry touched upon it. The legislature, they have the purse, and the executive, they have the sword, and the judiciary, we essentially have the goodwill of the people, right? We are not the enforcing agency, so we rely on the division of power that's in the Constitution, and that being the case, typically the enforcer is the executive branch. I would imagine some of you are saying, well, therein lies the rub. And again, and I think you have to go back and you have to be intellectually honest, I think at all times, because that's like why I tried to talk about what was going on 50 years ago and think about what you've all lived through. Some of you probably were around during Vietnam, so you've lived through wars, you lived through terrorist attacks, you lived through snipers running around DC and Maryland, killing people. You've lived through turmoil. You've lived through impeachments of different presidents. It's very easy to lose faith. And sometimes when you keep getting hit by the same thing over and over again, you just want to throw in the towel. But if the court's orders are not being followed, there's a problem with enforcement. And especially when I was on the state bench, I issued a lot of orders, and were there times they weren't followed? There probably were, but I did my part essentially, and this sounds like passing the buck, but that's the beauty of the whole system, right? I make the ruling. It's not my job to enforce. So there's no good answer, Cheryl. And, these things have been going on for a long time and probably will, because as Mike said, we're fallible. I don't have a good answer other than that.
All right. If there are no further questions at the moment, then I just want to extend another very big thank you to our 3 presenters today.
Anna.
And I would like to invite everyone to select an item from the semi-quincentennial table to take with them today. Also encourage you to grab some materials for Ollie if you are thinking that we're a community you would like to join and this is a class that excited you about the rest of our offerings. And there's also ice cream in our lounge. So please join us for ice
I
cream.
got 148 ice cream bars. I was at Costco 3 hours ago, so you. Thanks, gang.
Thank you.